Tonight our main story focuses on sanctions, something Trump arguably loves more than Melania. Scratch that, not arguably. Sanctions have been in the news a lot recently, but many citizens likely don't understand how they work. First of all, when most people talk about sanctions, they're referring to economic sanctions, which, broadly speaking, involve a country restricting or eliminating trade with a specific country or set of individuals. Sanctions can apply broadly to all areas of trade, like the US embargo of Cuba, or they can be targeted. These targeted sanctions, also called smart sanctions, try to minimize their effect on innocent civilians. Additionally, sanctions don't have to apply just to goods. They can also apply to people, either selectively, as with the US no-fly list of potential terrorists, or they can be complete, like with Trump's totally not a Muslim ban, wink wink, which you had completely forgotten about, but which is still in effect. Sanctions can be used for many reasons, including as punishment for undesired actions, as coercion to begin desired actions, and to make countries feel ashamed of unaccepted behavior. It's essentially like having a dog. You can use a shock collar if it's biting people, you can give it treats for not biting new people, or you can get a cone of shame to prevent it from biting itself. Basically what I'm saying is the US is an angry dog owner, and the rest of the world is our bitch. The main benefit of using sanctions is the low cost and low risk. They're sometimes seen as a middle ground between diplomacy and war. When a country isn't willing or able to use methods of force, economic sanctions can be used to negotiate arms deals, as was the case with the Iran nuclear deal, which Trump tossed out like one of his wives, and they can be used to promote human rights, as is the case with current sanctions on Syria. Sanctions are essentially the Goldilocks of international relations, not too harsh, but not too lax. The process for imposing sanctions depends on the country, but they can also be issued by conglomerates of countries like the UN and EU. In the UN, the Security Council votes to approve an action, which can then be vetoed by China, Russia, France, the UK, or the US. This veto power can mean that some sanctions that would harm one of these 5 countries can't pass, which prevented the imposition of UN sanctions on Syria, sanctions Russia seems to oppose for some reason. Even the sanctions that do pass have little enforcement, since, as I said previously, the UN has little power over what countries actually do. The EU follows a similar process, although the vote must be unanimous, and EU sanctions have greater enforceability. As much as I would like not to, we now have to discuss the sanction process in the US. You may be aware that US sanctions can be created through an executive order that declares a state of emergency, and these states of emergency can have long-lasting impacts. Unlike most emergencies, which are usually over in a couple of hours, the oldest state of emergency still in effect was created in 1979 by Jimmy Carter regarding Iran. That's true! Jimmy Carter, the least memorable president, declared a state of emergency that we are still in. But Congress can also create sanctions, and can change sanctions created by the president. The president can also alter congressional sanctions, but he must justify his decisions in an executive order. Some people theorize that this is why Trump hasn't lifted some sanctions on Russia, because he wouldn't have a good reason and wouldn't want to seem too friendly towards Russia. These theorists have obviously never heard Trump say this.
We've been very tough on Russia, frankly. But I will say that if we got along with Russia, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing. It's possible we won't. We're going to find out whether or not we do. But if we could all get along, that would be great. And that includes China, and that includes many other countries. But we'll see what happens. Only time will tell. But nobody has been tougher on Russia. But getting along with Russia would be a good thing, not a bad thing. And just about everybody agrees to that, except very stupid people.
The more difficult topic theorists argue about is the effectiveness of sanctions. Since I am neither an economist nor a politician, I don't really have an opinion on this topic, but I do have some advice for the president regarding sanctions. President Trump, please be careful when deciding how to impose sanctions. I know you think Iran is full of bad guys and that Russia is full of wonderful people, but sanctions are the most important tool in preventing war. I know it's not in your nature, but please listen to your advisors when they give you information. And I know it's also not in your nature, but consider the effect sanctions could have as situations change. Make sure you lift sanctions once a country does what you want. Create reasonable sanctions and reasonable treaties. And please try to get at least one other country to agree with your sanctions before you make them. Sanctions are complicated, and I really hope you don't screw everything up with them.